All right, in the meantime, the Chief Technical Advisor to the Minister, Adedayo Olowoniyi, outlined some of the strategic initiatives of the Nigerian government in the power sector in 2025 and 2026, as well as details of the Energy Compact agenda that the Honorable Minister spoke about. Let's listen.
A lot has been said already about the level of electrification in Nigeria, 61% electrification rate in Nigeria. When we talk about clean cooking, there's 26% access to clean cooking in Nigeria. We have a generation capacity of, I would say, 12 to 14 gig, depending on adding Zogeru and the age of certain plants. Part of the biggest challenge that we see in Nigeria, as mentioned earlier, is the liquidity issue. In Nigeria, I would say last year we had the opportunity of generating over 6 gigawatts. We can tell you because we have the data. But in a system that is not paying for its energy bills and does not pay a cost-reflective tariff, it's also very challenging for the discos to take the energy. So I would say we picked about 5.6 gigawatts last year. And based on the analysis and the availability of energy, we could have easily exceeded 6 gigawatts last year. Part of the biggest challenges outside of the liquidity is transmission infrastructure. We have a lot of vandalization, as the Honorable Minister has mentioned, and this is very challenging. In a country that has limited space from a capital perspective, we continue to go back to fix this infrastructure on a regular basis rather than focusing on expanding infrastructure. Gas constraints. The lack of investment in gas. 75% of our generation is thermal. And Nigeria remains a thermal country, by the way. We will continue to use gas as a transition fuel because this is our natural resource. But one thing that is important to touch base on is the fact that we have 14 gigawatts capacity for hydro in Nigeria. That is a significant capacity that we have not really tapped into. Hydro is still one of the cheapest sources of energy generation. And as a country such as Nigeria, we must tap into these resources to ensure that we can deliver least cost energy supply to consumers. Opportunities and challenges. And in my world, every challenge is an opportunity. Part of the challenge that I've seen in Nigeria is a lot of the capital that is pumped into this sector outside of government capital is short-term capital that requires a certain type of return, which the energy tariffs are not able to provide. The electricity sector is not the oil and gas sector that has such a large margin. The electricity sector is a sector that requires long-term cheap capital, which allows you to recover your cost over a period of time. There is a lot of investment required on the grid. And I am yet to see any country that has electrified or has industrialized purely based on mini grids. So the reality is that there has to be a combination of on-grid and off-grid investment to be able to drive the level of access and stability we need in the Nigerian electricity sector. From a clean cooking point of view, the target is 100%. This is very interesting because it is a significant challenge. Sometimes in Nigeria, we may not truly look at the impact of this, but we have over 150 million people that don't have access to clean cooking. And in terms of absolute numbers, is only second to China and India. So we have to look at what is possible here. And then in terms of share of renewables, we want to increase that, especially including hydro and private sector capitalization. We want to increase that to about 15.5 billion. Part of what we have to do as we look into Mission 300 is really to drive least cost planning in all our processes to ensure that we come out with a cost that allows us to set tariffs that actually answer our affordability question. Because that is a big question that Africa still needs to answer in terms of how much of a tariff can people actually afford and how do we make it affordable. I think one thing has been clear in Nigeria, we are gradually moving towards a cost-reflective tariff. We've done that on a segment of customers, which in Nigeria they call the Band A customers. So I think whenever we say that, people smile. But it's true. It has actually increased the level of energy payments in the sector from 10% to about 40%. And that's significant. From a policy point of view, we have to be committed to continuing to drive that process. In my opinion, when you give an environment that is sustainable, you also have more people that are willing to invest. And then your regulatory environment also gradually gets stronger because they can push their agenda as hard as they can without feeling that they are also not giving on the tariff space. So there's a lot of work that has been done through REA on driving that investment in last mile. I believe we can increase that with interconnected mini-grids, working with the discos and finding ways to partner in that segment. I think that would help reduce the pressure as well on the discos and really allow that capital to flow in without it necessarily being on the balance sheet of the discos. Without having a line of sight on your return, there is no way private sector will bring their money into this segment. So again, we hope that through Mission 300, we will be focusing on policies and regulation that will truly allow private sector capital to be catalyzed. I think Nigeria truly has the most to gain because we can sell energy to our neighbors. In a lot of the discussions I have with AFDB, Wale especially, he really is passionate about how we can actually trade energy. But trading energy is not as simple as it sounds. You know, you have your voltage levels, you have so many things that you have to control for interconnection to be able to work with our challenges on the national grid. This is also very, very difficult to connect with our neighbors. Again, goes back to reliability of infrastructure. If we're able to invest and drive reliable infrastructure, then we'll be able to connect with our neighbors and then we'll be able to sell electricity. So there's a lot of work that has to be done across the value chain to be able to achieve this. And there's a lot of profit for Nigeria if we're able to deliver on interconnection to our neighboring countries. So a portion of our investment in Mission 300 must go to capacity building across the value chain. In Nigeria, we have the biggest gap. And in Nigeria, we believe that if Nigeria is successful from an electrification point of view, then the whole of Africa is moving forward. We have an investment plan across generation. We are still evaluating what we would require on a private sector perspective because there's a lot of opportunity that will come as we continue to move more towards cost-reflective tariffs and where consumers are actually paying their energy bills. On transmission, it's just a no-brainer that we must continue to invest in transmission. We must continue to drive this investment to ensure interconnectivity, to ensure that the grid is actually managed and sustained. On distribution, we have to continue, which will link to the last mile. Without this, we cannot deliver quality, reliable energy to end users. On the off-grid segment, I think it's already clear that there's already a great program in Nigeria, probably the most viable market for the off-grid market, and we want to continue to drive that. But as we say, no country has fully electrified purely based on off-grid. We have to balance that with the on-grid. Clean cooking, maybe I haven't spent enough time on that, I apologize, but it is an area that we must focus on, and there's a significant opportunity to be able to drive investment across that value chain. So again, I hope with the presentation of this compact, our partners, development partners, have seen some of our plans And as we continue to work through this plan, I hope we'll be able to work together to be able to drive a successful Mission 300 in Nigeria.